Welcome back to The Education Currency. I'm Robert Namoski, proprietor of the Coaching College and founder of Ultimate Defence Academy.
G'day everyone, I'm Chris Kaladikis from Maximum Education. And what are we doing today, Rob?
Well, today we haven't got a guest on. We've actually got our third and most important member of our group.
Hello.
Welcome, Kate. You've been doing a lot this current session and season, getting us ready and get everything going. I think it's time everyone meets you.
Hello, nice to meet you all. It's very strange looking down the camera instead of being on the other side of it. So yes, hello, I'm Kate. I'm the producer of the Education Currency podcast and the other third of the team, usually the silent third, but not today.
Very humble for producer, director.
That's it, eh? The one who actually knows what podcasting is and actually
knows how to record and knows where to put it on.
Yeah.
It's pretty much wouldn't happen without you, Kate. Thank you very much for joining the team.
Thank you. I try to bring my value to the table.
And you bring a lot of value, and we appreciate it, okay?
And I only work with talent.
Now we're blushing.
And also people who pay me.
Well, we definitely are talent, Chris. In that case. So yeah, you have had quite unique educational experience going through university. And so give us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, first up, I'm not a teacher. I have teachers in my family and some of my best friends are teachers. And I think in another life, I probably would have been a teacher. It was about option 4 behind museum curator, costume designer, author, and then it was teacher. And I got into archaeology at uni, so I didn't end up becoming a teacher.
Wow.
But I do English tutoring now here at the Rockdale Coaching College. So it's been really nice to come back and get back to the students and remember what it was to be a student and to help kids kind of get back on that path of not hating English.
Yeah, and it's very easy to hate, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very easy. One of the first activities I get the kids to do is I give them 4 Post-its. A red one, that's what do you love about English? A purple one, that's what do you hate about English? Which they're usually like, oh my God, I get to say that. I get to admit that to a teacher because to them I am the teacher. And then 2 yellow Post-its for a goal for the term and a goal for the year. So, and I had one student this year go, oh, she loves writing essays, and I gave her back her Post-its from last year, and her I hate English Post-it was I hate writing essays, and she's like, oh my God, how did that change?
Yeah.
Job well done.
Wow, that's quite a testament to get that turnaround.
Yeah, I was like, oh good, you listened to when I talked about teal essays. Excellent.
Oh, God.
Good.
That acronym teal.
Oh, yeah. But different schools use different acronyms, so that can get a bit confusing. But anyway,
what would be some of the other terms for it?
I heard one this week of steel.
What's the S part?
The S was... God, I can't even remember. That's terrible.
You remember the name more?
I think
steel stays more than teal.
It wasn't source. It was another word for thesis. So I was just like, yeah.
That can be our question you can write in the comments today. What does S stand for in steel?
Yes. Yeah. Or peel. Peel is the other common one.
Yeah?
Yeah. So point instead of technique first.
But they all rhyme.
First. Yes. They all rhyme and they all amount to the same thing of point, example, explain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. So
sorry.
So then one thing, because it is quite a unique career and quite a unique education. So what was it that, at what point in your life did you go, this is it, I'm becoming Lara Croft?
Usually it's Indiana Jones is what most people say, like what indie movie made you want to do archaeology. To which I will say I did not watch all the Indiana Jones movies until I was finished my degrees.
Wow.
I'd seen the 3rd one growing up.
Yeah.
Saw the 4th one at the cinemas, which was a massive mistake.
Yeah, that's not a good way to into Indiana Jones.
That mistake. So what got me into it was I used to watch a lot of documentaries.
Yeah.
There was a lot of documentaries on particularly ABC and SBS at that time. And I just loved the ancient world and trying to understand taking the evidence and then extrapolating from that what we could know. So you take a mummy, you look at the embalming fluids, that shows the influence of trade, shows the social cultural influence of why embalming was important after death, even the little amulets and talismans that they put in the wrappings of, you know, this one was for that god and that one was for that goddess, and this is the roles that they played, and yeah.
Wow.
And also bog bodies.
What?
Bog bodies.
What is that?
Okay,
For our viewing audience and myself.
A bit gruesome. But there's a part of Northern Europe, so like Denmark through to Ireland, but not so much Scotland or England.
Yeah.
And at some stage they practiced ritual sacrifice. And they would throw people into the local marsh, the swamp, and sacrifice them. They would give them a nice meal beforehand, and then they would kill them, and sometimes overly kill them.
Yeah.
And throw them into the local bog to, you know, appease the gods or make the weather better.
Yeah.
And yeah, they've dug these bodies up, and some of them were so well preserved that they actually thought they were modern murder victims.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they've gotten like microscopic close-ups of their fingernails, so they can tell that they used to cut their fingernails with bronze implements. They still have their fingerprints.
Okay.
They can go into the stomachs if the stomach is still preserved, and using chemistry work out what their last meal was.
Yeah.
Which then also looks at what time of year and season it was, because certain foods would have been around. And then they can also analyse the pollens of the plants that were flowering at the same time.
Wow.
So all this kind of stuff I was really interested in. So basically it comes back down to that thing of how do you convince people to build a pyramid?
Yeah.
You know, you have to say, you know, how do you motivate anyone to do anything?
I know. My gosh. Yeah.
And so it's that thing of how do you organise society, and then you have to clothe people, you have to feed people, you have to give them a home, you have to look after their families. This is in the ancient world, so you've got stone tools, bronze tools, iron tools, big technological leap between each of those things as well. And yeah, that just kind of, that was what interested me about archaeology.
Yeah.
So I got into Sydney Uni. Did get to have lectures in the quad there in the Great Hall, so I felt like Harry Potter.
Before Harry Potter.
Before Harry Potter.
Yes.
Technically, I specialise in what's termed historical archaeology. So in Australia, it's from settlement onwards. I'm very bad at shell middens, so I don't really do Indigenous archaeology. I have a lot of respect for people who do it, and it's increasingly very important to understand that pre-colonial history. That stretches back roughly about, current estimate, 60,000 years.
Wow.
So it's one of the oldest continuous
Cultures, yeah.
cultures. Yeah. So yeah, that's archaeology. From that, I went into a Masters of Museum Studies straight away.
Wow.
Because I realised once you dig something up and you analyse it, the bog body or the Egyptian artefact or the shell midden ends up in a museum.
Yes.
And then the museum is where you tell the story.
Yeah.
Which is what really interested me. What's the point of finding out all this cool stuff if we don't tell the story?
Yes.
And then within museums, I've specialised in what's termed registration or collection management, curatorial, and digitisation, which covers both making collections available online, photographing, digitising them, and then also interpreting them online, so videos, blogs, social media, podcasts.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And it's what's led you down that avenue. And look, the thing about we understand with museums too is you've got to cater to an audience there.
Oh, yes.
You want families coming through, and you've got some, obviously, those who are really big into the history and want to know authentically what happened, the facts. And then, obviously, speaking from someone with a family too, what's going to make my kids interested in seeing that side? And what are some of the things you've seen in museums to kind of attract the families to the museum and, get the kids involved?
Oh, that's a great question. Also, relating to museums come in all shapes and sizes. So they go all the way from the big national museums like the Smithsonian and the British Museum, all the way down to your local museum, usually run by your local council. And then also you've got volunteer-led museums and occasionally a private museum, which is usually a specialist niche museum. All those things will cater for the family audience in different ways.
Yes.
But mostly in Sydney, which is where we are.
Yes.
The big museums will have a school holiday program.
Yes.
Lots of arts and crafts. They put a lot of effort into developing those programs and having a lot of fun for the kids, but also educational outcomes.
Yeah.
And making sure that the parents feel that they've gotten their money's worth.
Yeah.
Because we want the families to keep coming back again and again, because ideally someone who enjoys museums as a kid comes back as an adult.
Yes, and keeps that culture going.
Yeah.
And it is like whenever I've taken out, especially that we are lucky in Sydney, to the Australian Museum, to the Maritime Museum, like it's always been just a good showing. They're welcome, multiple activities to go in different directions. And it's so important. You really highlighted that you've got to stimulate that interest when children are young. And so that they do grow up to value their culture, value their heritage, and obviously to learn from, like you said, all the amazing stuff that past cultures did. And because some of that, all of that foundational stuff about society, it's still true today.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, like the more I find out about ancient societies, and even, there's that quote of people who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it.
That's it, yeah,
and
100%.
the more you learn about history, the more you go like, oh, God, they're still human. They're all the same. Some of the oldest writing that they've deciphered and then translated into modern languages basically amounts to, I went to your store and you sold me the wrong thing. You're a thief.
So the Karens back then too?
Yeah.
Was your manager?
It's exactly the same. I proposed to you, we're not getting married now, give me back my goat.
Wow. That's it.
We progressed from wedding rings to goats, but still it's the same.
And it always comes back to insulting your mother.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Where it hurts the most, I guess.
Yeah, it doesn't change. I'm glad that you mentioned the Maritime Museum because I was there for many years.
Yeah.
Worked with their education team, but not on the education team. And we're recording on International Women's Day by happenstance. Purple. One of the programs I volunteered and helped out with was International Women's Day.
Oh,
so we would have high school girls come in, they would have a morning of seminars with women who work in STEM, and then they would have like a little exhibition hall of scientific careers that they could go into. And after that, then the staff would give them a tour behind the scenes of collection management, registration, photography, and conservation.
Wow.
Which conservation are the people who conserve the objects. But basically, if you think about a museum, you think either about a curator or a person in a lab coat.
Yes.
And they're not, contrary to what Hollywood makes you believe, they're not the same people.
Okay.
Even at a small museum level, they're a different set of very specialised skills.
Yeah.
They work very closely together. But conservation uses its material science and has a very strong chemistry component to work out, how do I stop this piece of paper from disintegrating?
Yeah.
How do I make this ship model look good enough for display and stable enough for display?
Yes.
So, that's one of the things that, that's outreach for the museum.
But how good is that? Like,
Yeah.
even just like the hearing you just say that in relation to STEM, which is an area I'm very passionate about in my realm, and just the fact that, yes, there is a need for young women to find, or all women, to find that industry as a way to go to, because, there's something not attracting it to it. The intelligence is there. Why can't, we filter them in? And yes, museums as a support for doing that, showing the stories of how successful women have been in the past in that industry. Like, that would have been amazing for those young girls that came in.
Oh, yeah. And it was, because I used to do the tours of the storerooms. So we'd have a paper object store, a large object store, the photography room, and and then sometimes the small objects or the up to conservation. And it was interesting to see what girls at what school got interested in which objects as you walk them through. And it was always quite fun. I remember there was one year where everyone was obsessed with Instagram.
Yeah.
So the photography studio was like the most popular thing.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I can do this for a job and I get to interact with all these cool things and I get to use this camera that's not my phone camera. And yeah, that was really inspiring.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent.
It's really good. But, okay, so with yourself, with our education podcast, how did you get into podcasting?
Oh, I read a book called Why Your Museum Needs a Podcast.
Oh. That's good. I think that was the right book to read.
It was a very good book to read. And I have to say, it was very well written. And I copied or was strongly inspired by a lot of her steps for that. And having been in the digital world for museums for a few years at that point, I had kind of seen a lot of the social media stuff come and go. This is before TikTok and short form vertical video had taken off. And we didn't have the resources to really do a kick-ass, hope I can use that word.
Don't worry, our producer will edit it out.
Yeah, she'll decide what's appropriate or not.
A really cool YouTube channel. So the next option that I thought most Australian museums hadn't cornered was podcasting. And I was at the Maritime Museum at this time. And the Maritime Museum is perceived as a very blokey museum.
Okay.
It's a very blokey history.
Yeah.
That's what all our market research tells us. And I just thought there's so many excellent stories that would just translate very well to audio. So I started to work up a business case of, how do we do this? Do we go to an external podcasting thing? Do we do it in-house? If we do it in-house, how do we do it? And then I fell down the rabbit hole and learnt way too much about microphones and audio editing and kind of took it upon myself to do some little pilot episodes. And then COVID hit.
Yes.
So I didn't actually end up producing a podcast for the Maritime Museum. We had season 1 sketched out.
Yep.
But again, COVID changed the world.
Yes, it did.
And I changed jobs.
Yes.
So I was then part-time working for a private collector who was still in the maritime field. And one of my colleagues there was very into podcasts. And I told her about all the research I had done. And we just decided to do it during second lockdown. And it was narrative-based. It had a soundtrack. It was, season 1 was based on spooky seas, so it was all the supernatural tales that you hear about, of like the ghost ship, the haunted lighthouse.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Sea monsters, and why and how sea monsters are shown on maps up until about the Victorian era. Like it went on for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a whole history to how and why monsters were shown on maps and at different points.
They believed they were in the ocean, but did they?
Yeah. Because the ocean is a creepy place.
Yeah.
it's up until recently, more people had gone to the moon and walked on the moon than had seen the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean.
Yeah. Wow.
Really?
Yeah, and less than
Wow.
70%. About 5 years ago, less than 70% of the deep ocean had been mapped. That's rapidly changed in the last few years, so I don't know what the current stat is, but...
Yeah, with technology.
Yeah, there could be a crack in there.
Yeah, could be.
There could
That's
be.
it.
I'm still waiting for Nessie to appear somewhere. So anyway, did that, had a lot of fun, and then that job finished, and then I was working for Rob as an English tutor, coming back to the Post-its. And
Very grateful. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Rob. And then you guys mentioned that you were doing a podcast, and I was like, I know how to podcast.
Yeah. Well, look, with that from our side too, one of the main instigators for us to get going is Rob's like, I know someone who knows how to do a podcast. Let's do this. And then it's just funny just how that journey came along, and like here we are now, like, you know, us from just talking the playground, you interacting with Rob and working here, and obviously the history you have with Rob, and then suddenly you find, you know, a new pathway, a new journey together based on your shared experiences in the past.
And this is our 10th episode, and I tell you what, this team has just fit like a glove.
Yeah. It's been pretty good.
Yeah.
From a conversation in the playground on education, topics that we were passionate about furthering our own knowledge, to actually having a professional come in and actually do the podcast, you know, with us together.
Yeah.
So this is your team, the education currency.
That's it, eh?
Right here.
Yes.
That's who we got. And well, we've learned one rule, haven't we?
Yes.
If in doubt, what do we do?
Ask Kate.
Ask Kate. And what's always the answer?
Yes, Kate.
I could let that go to my head.
Yes. You could, but you don't.
You could, but you don't.
Yes.
Yeah, you're too articulate and very Mary Poppins-like to let that happen.
You are.
Yes.
And one of the things we're learning today is podcast voice, which I think, Kate, you've mastered, and me and Rob need a bit of work on it, don't we?
I don't know. Let's see if we can get there in season 2, Chris.
We'll get there. We've got some homework to do during the break.
Yeah.
So some final questions, I guess, for Kate.
Yep.
In the world, what museums do I need to go to?
Oh, okay. What do you like?
What do I like? I like Nintendo. Technology. That'd be the more professional answer.
The Victoria and Albert Museum in London.
Oh, yeah?
It's a museum of design.
Yes.
A bit like the Powerhouse.
Okay.
So they would touch on gaming.
Yeah.
The other one in Australia is ACME in Melbourne, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image.
Oh, wow. So like in the old Warner Brothers, that have the Acme tools and all that?
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah?
And that's under Federation Square. And they actually have a curator of gaming.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In Melbourne?
Yeah, in Melbourne.
Okay.
And their director, CEO, is an incredible person in the world of digital in the museums, but he's also very big on design and gaming and other ways that we're capturing digital culture, basically. So it's really nice to see museums going down that modern route.
Just hearing what you're saying actually just put something to my head in relation to VR.
Yeah.
How is VR actually influencing museums and curation and how we experience?
It's a very exciting dream.
Yes.
And again, having experienced the digital in the museum, I
Yes.
have a very complicated relationship with the digital in the exhibition space and how is it done well and how does it do in a way that exceeds and excites expectations.
Yes.
Because having an iPad there that you touch a few buttons is standard these days.
Yes.
The biggest thing with VR for most exhibitions is the budget cost.
Yeah.
And having the development behind the scenes. And whether usually you go to an external developer. And then 5 years down the road, no one's got the contact for the external developer and then you don't know how to fix the headset and so it just gets taken out of the exhibition. Yeah. But to be positive, there's a lot of hopes and dreams that eventually, like if you had an exhibition on Pompeii, you'd put a headset on and you'd be able to visualise being back in Pompeii, have a soundscape with it.
And then suddenly Mount Vesuvius blows up and you see the ash coming.
Another thing that I was training in was photogrammetry, which is a very fancy way of taking thousands of photos of an artefact and then using computer generations to smush that into a model.
Wow.
And then you can use that model with VR and, your iPad and everything to like spin it around and zoom in and see it in a way that you don't have to be staring at it through a display case.
Yes.
So that's a very big application.
Because you can get really, although it's digital, but you can get so close into it.
Like the amount of detail a good 3D scan of an object can get is quite mind-blowing. And again, every 3 to 5 years, the technology takes a huge leap.
Yeah.
And when I was working at the Silent World Foundation, their big project was conserving, when they were building the Barangaroo station, new metro station in Sydney, they found a boat.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Silent World has the contract to conserve the boat. So they had to take it apart and basically pickle it there's scientific stages and words and chemicals and stuff that we use. But that was basically the thing. They had to impregnate it with wax and take the water out of this 200-year-old waterlogged wood.
Yeah.
But they created photogrammetry models of every single piece of wood, and there's like over 200 pieces of wood.
Wow.
And then they're going to use that to help reconstruct it when it all comes back together from the freeze dryer.
And they'll see what this boat initially looked
what
like.
it is, yeah.
Wow.
But then for the public, when eventually, if that goes on exhibition, they can use that photogrammetry scans to create a 3D model and maybe a VR of going down the Hawkesbury River 200 years ago. And,
in that type of boat.
In that type of boat, and what would have been on the boat and everything. So, they're very big applications.
Yeah, I was just amazed because, like, Apple's recently announced the Apple Vision Pro. Like, it's starting to get mainstream now, these headsets, and, they probably can adapt them to museums and things like that. Like, that's crazy what's going on.
For myself, I'm really interested in, say, World War II.
Oh, okay. Yes, so
Where do I need to go?
Yes, not World War I, World War II.
World War II.
Okay, of course, the Australian War Memorial.
Yes, been there.
Been there,
Yep.
done that.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep, like the bomber in the hall that comes alive with the sound effects and everything. Yep. The Imperial War Museum in London.
Need to go there.
Need to go there.
Yep.
Yes, that's quite good. They've got a very strong education program as well, by the way. I know someone who worked in that.
In London?
In London, yeah.
Well, they would have, yes. It was a big part for London.
I think it's a very sensitive topic for them.
And also, I know it's not World War II, but Gallipoli itself is done a lot for their the visitor, so the audience, the museum audience visiting.
Nice.
What else for World War II? Trying to think.
Because every country's got its own story, doesn't it? What kind of went down there?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about museums is one of the first things that tends to happen when you create a new country is you set up a national museum.
Yeah.
That's how important telling a cultural story is.
It is your identity.
It's your identity.
It is. It's without a museum, you do not have a country.
Yeah, exactly. But the irony with Australia is because we were set up so close to World War I and it took them kind of so long to decide on let's make Canberra, and then World War I happened, and then they're building Canberra. They create the War Memorial at the same time. So Australia didn't get a national museum until the 90s.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't even think of that.
No. Yeah. John Howard brought it in. I can't remember exactly when it opened, but the National Museum of Australia is in NMA, is in Canberra. But in effect, the War Memorial acted as our national museum for a long time.
Yeah.
And the Australian Museum in Sydney is named because it was founded in I think it's the 1880s.
Yeah.
It's got a lovely big sandstone building. But that's natural history.
Yeah.
It's not social, cultural history. It's not making of the nation of Australia.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
There you go.
and final question for you.
Yeah.
What's your number one museum that you would like to visit that you haven't been to?
Oh, that I haven't been to. I have a list.
Number one.
Number one, probably the Smithsonian. Which is in America and is in fact about 11 meters.
Editor Kate here. This is the point where the batteries in the audio mixer failed. The joys of having your producer in front of the camera instead of behind it. So I've tried my best to recover the audio from the camera mics. Apologies, it's a bit echoey.
Museums.
Okay. We see what you're doing there.
Yes.
For you said a Russian one, if you take wasn't it when you look at every artifact, it will take you 2 years.
Yeah. No, I'm forgetting.
What was that one called?
The name of it. Oh, that's terrible. We talked about it a lot in my degree, but the Russian one is absolutely gorgeous, and that would be nice to go to as well.
What kind of things at the Smithsonian?
Everything. Specifically, I would like to see the space exhibition.
Yeah.
Particularly now that the powerhouse is closed, so I can't see the space exhibition in Sydney, because I quite find all the designing that they had to come across when they went to space fascinating.
Yeah.
They have some wonderful Indigenous Native American exhibitions that have been developed closely the recent ones with community.
Yes.
That's a whole nother topic, but it's very important to decolonise the museum and to bring in the voices who should be having a say and not just the white academic voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I'm really broadening like who was their history and hearing it from those communities, which is essential.
It's so important. One museum that I would like to go back to, because it changes every 10 years because they find something new, is Vindolanda, which is on Hadrian's Wall, up in the north of England, just outside of York. It's about an hour's drive from York. And it was a Roman fort, but it was a successive Roman fort. So they had about, last I heard, again it could be different now, 11 legions, 11 Roman levels of people being stationed there successively. But each lot of people who were stationed there had different needs, so they would level the fort when they left, and then the next people would come and they'd build a new fort. So they've got about 200 years worth of digging to do.
Work in progress.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like Pompeii. You can walk around the stones and you can see the layout of the town, and they have incredible artifacts as well. Lots of coins, lots of leather shoes, lots of wax tablets that people used to write on for memos and orders that have survived. So that's one magic.
Excellent.
Sure. Yes.
All right. Then I guess with that, Rob, does that bring us to the end of the season?
That's our 10th episodes. And we, Kate, the boss.
Yeah. We're not thanking her for being here tonight because she should be here.
That's right. This is not a guest.
Yeah.
And we've wrapped up 10 seasons.
Yes.
All right.
Well done.
So thank you very much, everyone, for listening to us so far. We'll be back soon, I hope, with season 2. And
we've got guests ready for season 2.
Rob sorted everyone out. There's
a list.
There's a list of guests, and we're very excited about. These are people who've been in the education industry for a very, very long time. They've achieved different stages of their careers and in their expertise, and we should be up in a couple more weeks with them.
Yeah. So while we're not thanking you for being here tonight, okay, we are thanking for all your hard work you've done so far with us this season. Okay, and we'll be bringing it this side of the camera a bit more as we go into our next season as well, okay?
Yes, so, absolutely. So from our team, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, guys.
See you.
Bye.
Yeah.
What?
I don't know when that stopped.
That's right.
The lights were on recently.
Oh, were they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've noticed the lights were from, if that can stop, it's only been the last few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.